Today's daf, the Motzaei Shabbat daf is, here we go, Yud Zayin, 17 in Masechet Avodah Zarah, towards the end of the first parak. And we're going to start from the two dots. Is that what you guys got up to? You get past the two dots? Well, I'm going to start from
Yeah.
So we're starting from the two dots on towards the bottom, 10 lines from the bottom of Tet Zayin on the bet. The Mishnah said, Ein Bonim, certain things, right? You can't build these, what was the Mishnah? Basilki, Gardom, Itztadaya, Bima. You learned all about these things. They're all things that are used in some format, we think, for killing people, for meeting judgment. So it says, that was the Mishnah. It says Rabbi Chanan Rabbi Yochanan, 5 lines from last narrow lines. Shlosha basilkotain. There are 3 kinds of, I don't know if he has a word in English, but it sounds like basilica. Right, but the meaning here, Rashi said, at least in the Mishnah, some tall building that could be used for judgment or for worship or for punishment. There's 3 types of basilka. There's one that are built by the kings who are of the Avodah Zarah, and shomer chatzaot. There are those that are built for bathhouses, so they were big public baths. The shel otzarot, and there were the finance buildings where they stored all their money. And they built big things to show. Rashi says here that to show that they were great and that they were very, rich, etc. And says Rava, Amar Rava, shnayim leheter. 2 are permitted. The echad lisar, 1 is not permitted. Which one is not permitted? The one that was built for the kings who are of the Avodah Zarah. Siman, and the Siman is the pasuk in Tehillim that we read in Sugei Zimra, le'esar malchehem bezikim. It prohibits, of course, it's not what it literally means, right? But it prohibits the kings with their chains, meaning you can't you can't build the basilki for the kings because they're going to use it either for idol worship or they're going to use it to punish people and harm them, and you can't be complicit in that. Some said on Rava Kulan Leheter that Rava in fact said they're all permitted. Our Mishnah said that it's not im bonini mahem basilki gardam itzadayu ubima. Our Mishnah said you can't do it. So how could Rava say they're all permitted? Says Rava, our Mishnah means not that you can't build a basilki, but you can't build a basilki of a gardom, of itztadaya, of bima. So ema shel gardom, shel itztadaya, shel bima. So if the basilki is being used for different kinds of judgment where they take people up and they throw them off the top, and so they used to kill people or harm them otherwise, then you're being complicit in their murder and you're not allowed to build it with them. Now, Tanur Rabbanan, it says the Braita, we're going to have a couple of really interesting stories the next couple of days. Roman stories, all very sad stories, because that was the interactions of the Jews and the Romans, sadly. But Tanur Rabbanan, says the Braita, Kishenitfas Rabbi Eliezer leminut. Rabbi Eliezer was, nitfas literally means, I guess, attached or attacked, and even, it's not what it means attacked, but it means he was accused maybe, and by the minut, which means the secular government, or in this case, the Roman government. So he was basically arrested and accused of worshiping his religion and being punished. They would kill you for that. So he was brought to court. They brought him to this gardom, which we talked about in our Mishnah. I don't know what the English would be, but again, a court, basically a judgment place where they would judge you and then kill you at the end if you were guilty. Lidon. So they brought him up to judge him for worshiping God. Amar lo oto hegmon. So the hegmon, the leader of this whatever sect of Roman or whatever religion, said to Rebbe Eliezer, "Zaken shekemotcha yasuk b'dvarim b'telim halalu." How could a senior scholar like you deal with this kind of dvarim b'telim, referring to Judaism, saying, "Why are you enamored with Judaism? Why are you following the rules? Why are you listening?" Amarlo, so he said, Rebbe Eliezer said to this hegmon, "Ne'aman alai hadayan." I trust your judgment, is what he thought it sounded like. So kasavar oto hegmon, that hegmon thought alav hu omer, he was saying about him. So he was saying, I accept your judgment. Judaism is really false. I'm going to change my ways. Of course, in his mind, he meant keneged the real Dayan. Hu lo amer la keneged aviv shebashamayim. He was saying, I trust God, and that's what my belief is in, the real Dayan. But basically, the hegmon heard what he wanted to hear, and Amarlo, he said to him, Ho v'hamanti alecha, since you trust me, dimus paturata. By dimus, Rashi explains, I think usually, and I'm not sure if it's here, that dimus is sort of how they swore. Dimus was the name of their god in some way, even though in our Mishnah we use it differently. And they said, by God or by Zeus, I will free you. So it was a way of sort of swearing in their culture. That's how Rashi, I think, usually it's somewhere, or Tosas here talks about that. That by the compassion of the gods, I free you. And so he sent him home. Now, when he came to his house, his students came to comfort him. And most understand they comfort him because it basically, he came out of this looking like he was worshiping the idols, right? It didn't look so great for Eliezer. He got freed, but basically because the guy was convinced that he was not doing Judaism. So that looked very bad for him, or he was very sad about that. So he got home, his students wanted to comfort him. And he would not accept comfort. He said, I don't deserve this. I don't know what happened. I don't know, God punished me, or did something wrong because it looks like I'm Avodah Zarah. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva was one of his students, I guess, said to him, Rebbe, correct? Rebbe, Tarsheni lomar davar echad mimcha mimashav limadatani. Permit me to tell you over something that you taught me. Rebbe Akiva did this often. He comforted his teachers, including the end of his life with Rebbe Eliezer. Teach me, let me tell you something that you taught me. Amarlo Emor, he gave him permission, say, Amarlo Rebbe, said to him, maybe the reason this happened to you and the reason you had to sort of be punished with this and get a kapara is Shema minut baliyadcha v'hana'acha. Maybe once you encountered some minut, some heresy, we'll call it, and you enjoyed it, basically, meaning you sanctioned or you were acted inappropriate, and this is your punishment, but you're getting the punishment, and now you've gotten what you needed, meaning God took it out from you in this world. The alav nitfasta, and that is why you were captured and accused and had to deal with these minim. Amarlo, Sir Rabbi Eliezer said, Akiva, hiskartani, you reminded me. I was once walking, this was, of course, the famous Shuk Al-Yon Shel Tzipori. Umatzati echad, I bumped into one guy who was a min, I guess not a Jew, but certainly not a practicing Jew. But Yaakov Ish Kfar Sachnai, his name was Yaakov Ish Kfar Sachnai. He was a famous min.
Can I just say, my Gersa says, Adam echad mitalmidei Yeshu HaNatzri.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And his name was Yaakov Ish Kfar Sachnaya. Like Robert's joining us. And Marley, Shavua Tov, Robert. I know we started early, so
right. We had Kiddush Levana here in Lakewood. So
okay, don't worry, we'll accept that answer. We're on Daf Yud Zayin 17, and we are right now at the fourth line, where Rabbi Eliezer is remembering a story where he was walking in Tzipori. He bumped into a guy who, I guess, uncensored, was a student of Jesus. And his name was Yaakov Ish Kfar Sachnai Shmo. Was he one of the people in Christianity? I guess we'll have to, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, his name was Yaakov Ish Kfar Sachnaya, and he said to me, Amarli Ketuv b'Toratchem. It says in your scripture, obviously he was separating himself from the people. Lo tavi etnan zona, v'mechir kelev beit Hashem lokecha. Right? Don't bring a animal that was given in payment for znut, for prostitution, to the Beit Hamikdash. Mahu lasot himenu beitakise, the Kohen Gadol, right? What about, maybe you can't use it for a karban, but can you use it for like the lowliest things, like to make a toilet or a room for the Kohen Gadol? Remember, the Kohen Gadol had to be isolated 7 days before Yom Kippur, so he obviously had to have a bathroom in there, right? So can you use this thing, and he's playing games with him basically. Can you use it for worship that's not obviously holy in that case? I didn't say anything to him. I don't know because I didn't know the answer. I wouldn't want to engage with the guy. But Amarli, he said to me, right? Etnan zona yashuvu l'makom mimakom. I'm sorry, where am I? Etnan zona. The way I understand it is that an etnan zona can go back. Yashuvu mimakom atinofet ba'u l'makom atinofet yilechu. Right? Meaning the pasuk says etnan zona yashuvu. It means that it comes from a dirty place, from an illicit act, and it can go back to that place. I mean, you can use it to build a bathroom because it's something that's not clean. V'hanaiti hadavar, right? I got joy. I was like, oh, that's a great shot in the pasuk. I enjoyed it, but ayidei davar zenit fasti the minut. And because I didn't sort of separate myself from him and I enjoyed what he told me, I was gathered up in the wave of oppression of minut. Because I went against what was written in the Torah, which is harchek me'alecha darkecha. It's pasuk in Mishlei, of course, that you should make yourself very far away from that evil path. What's that evil path? Zu minut. That's referring to heresy. Ve'el al takriv al petach beita. Don't let it come close to the opening of your door. Zeh harishut. That's saying you shouldn't get close to the government. You shouldn't let, even which is not per se minut, but obviously it goes through many mishnayot in Pirkei Avot. Be very careful about the government because they're going to come to you and you'll get too involved, you'll get into trouble. Ikadami, now some say that the way you darshan the pasuk in Mishlei is harchek mi'alecha darkecha, that when it says separate your path from it really far, that's referring to both minut and reshut, heresy and the government. And then when the pasuk continues and says al takrev al petach beita, don't let it come close to the entrance of your house, or you shouldn't go close to its house. Zuz zonah, that's referring to prostitution or things like that. Vikama, now how far away are you supposed to be? Hamar v'chista arba amot. You're supposed to be 4 amot away. So I don't know exactly what that means, but don't let it get close to your house. I mean, keep your distance, like social distancing from, I guess, both of them, minut and avodah zarah and zona. Rabbanan, now, how do Rabbanan darshan the pasuk if you don't have this explanation that he heard? What do you say? Hi, me etnan zona my darshive. What does it mean? Don't have something come me etnan zona. Kedr v'chista. They darshan it from Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said a statement that kol zona sheniskeret, every zona who gets money, meaning she rents herself out or she pays, gets people to pay her, libisof he socheret. Ultimately, she will become poor and she will have to pay money for others to provide her favors. Shenemar, as it says, in Yecheskel, b'titcha etnan ve'etnan lo nitein lecha v'ti lefech. Right, that you give as an etnan, and then you actually become. You have to get, sorry, and then you have to give. But in general, this statement that you have to separate yourself from minut and from reshut goes against Reb Padat. The Amar Reb Padat, Tosh is very bothered by how Reb Padat really can say this, but Reb Padat said, "Lo asrat Torah el kreva shel gilui arayot bovad." The only time that the Torah really, really cares about you being very far away is if it's gilui arayot, not minut maybe, and not even etnan, which of course is not gilui arayot, right? It's not appropriate, but it's certainly not that level. Shenamar, and he bases on the pasuk in Kedoshim, which says, "Ish al kol she'er b'saro lo tikrav ligalot erva." That you shouldn't tikruvu, sorry, you shouldn't come close only if it's gilui erva, but you don't have to be as concerned about these other things. Ula, this is also a very interesting story. Kihavi ati mi beirav. When Ula would come home from yeshiva, right, he would come home from college. Havi menashik lula achte abeyadayo. He would kiss his sister on her hands. Va'amrila abechadayo, and some say on her neck. Chadayo is her like you kiss on the neck, like on the face. Upliga didei adidei, but this actually seems to disagree with something else Ula said. Damar Ula, because Ula said, kreva ba'alma asur, even getting close to your relatives who are prohibited to sleep with, right, like a sister, would be even prohibited. Mishum, because of the famous thing we say, lech amina nazira, we tell a nazir, right, keep your distance. Chor, go around the karmelot grave. Don't even go close to the vineyard, because a nazir, of course, can't drink grapes. He can walk through a vineyard, there's no prohibition, but we tell him don't do that because we try to make all kinds of harchakot, all kinds of distances. And of course, so it's not clear why he did it in one case and didn't do it in the other case either.
So he's so obnoxious and staying far away from Yalta, Rav Nachman's wife.
Right.
But
this is his sister, so it's not exactly even someone else's wife, which is very.
Yeah, but it's like, I don't even talk to him. I
Right.
don't even give regards through you.
Correct.
To her.
Right. Yeah. So either this was when he was young, maybe, or he evolved later. Who knows? Anyways, on the same topic, there's this really, really strange story at the end of Mishlei, which I would advise everyone to look into because it's quite an interesting series of psukim. But it tells this like crazy parable, and it says La Aluka Shtei Banot. This Aluka, which I think is a name as we think of it. I don't know what the meaning is outside of that. There were 2 daughters. Hav. They were called Hav. And the Mishlei goes through a whole story with them. But ask the Gemara, what is Hav? So Amar Mar Ukva says that is Kol Shtei Banot. This is the name of these 2, I'll call them sirens, right? Daughters who are tempting the men. Shetzoakot migehenom. They are calling, is that where I am?
Mhm.
Yeah, they're calling out from hell. Va'omrot ba'olam hazeh, and they're saying to people in this world, have, come to us. Right? They're like the sirens calling out. What is that? Maninu, minut v'harashut. The temptation of being involved with the government, because you rush this, you make a lot of money, you're in power, and minut, and being with the Christians in this case, or other heretics. Ikadami, some say that's in fact the sound of Gehenom calling out. Saying, so Gehenom is calling, saying, bring me my 2 daughters from this world. It's the same message, but either the daughters are calling out or your Gehenom is calling out. And the pasuk, this is a pasuk in the beginning of Mishlei, first of the intermediate wide lines. It says, Kol bo'eh lo yeshuvun, Everyone who goes there won't come back. And they won't achieve the paths of life. Well, if you don't come back, how are you going to live forever, right? If you go to this sin, you never come back. Heichan yasigo, how in the world would you achieve the paths of life? It says more hachikamer. This is what it says. Im yashuvo. Most people go there, can't do tshuva. But if you do the effort and make tshuva, lo yasigo archot chayim, you'll never live a full life again, right? Lememra, what it says is the kol haporesh minut mayit, that everyone who, it's really hard to do tshuva if you get stuck up with minut. Minut is heresy again, right? False beliefs. But if you do, you're going to die. Not clear if that means you're going to die literally, which the Gemara makes it sound like, or you're going to never be fully alive inside, but you'll never be part of the Archot Chaim, even if you do tshuva. You can, but you'll never be part of it. Ask Gemara, but is that true? There was once a person who came, a woman who came in front of Rav Chisda of Amra Le, and she said to him, you know, I'm such an evil person. I want to do tshuva, but I've done so many sins. Kalash shebekalot asta b'na hakatan mibna gadol. The least of the sins I've done was having my younger son with my older son, right? So pretty bad. And so the Amar la Rav Chisda said, well, you can do tshuva. Tarchalei bizavdata. You can work with zavdata. Rashi zavdata are people who make shrouds. So being focused on death, and it reminds you of, you know, your mortality. And then she was able to do tshuva. She didn't die. V'lo meta. Right? So it says, if she said the lightest thing I did was this kind of sexual problem, I must have done minut, right? And she lived. So how could she live? It says, well, she didn't really do tshuva. She didn't do a full tshuva. Because if you really put your whole soul into doing tshuva, the I don't know how to explain it, but the trauma and the effort of pulling yourself away from that life is enough to kill a person. And again, whether it's literal, which we'll see in a second, or it's you're dead inside, she was sort of not a complete balat tshuva. Some say it's not true, that in fact, miminut in mi'averalo, that this is true, that you can't ever go back from minut and stay alive, but you can come back from avera. You can come back from sexual impropriety. And they tell the story, Vahid atai kamid Rav Chisda, v'amalei Rav Chisda, zvidala zavdata, umeta. Rav Chisda said to her, you know, do tachlichim, and she did tshuva, and she died. So you see that even though she just did sexual things, sleeping with her son, she died. So answers the Gemara here, right? The truth is that she, in fact, had done minut, and that's why she died. So according to this version, she in fact did die, but it was because she did minut. But from avodah, from sexual things, you can do tshuva. Ask more, is that true? If you're coming doing full tshuva from avera, you don't die. Tanya, this is a very, very, very famous story, I think, at least for me it is. Amru alav Rabbi Elazar ben Dordaya. It's a very famous story about a man named Rebbe Eliezer ben Dordaya, or Rebbe Elazar, I guess. Shlohaniach zona achat b'olam shelo ba'ala. He had done the quest, the full quest. Every prostitute in the world, every zona in the world, he had the acquaintance. Pam achat shamayna. One day he hears, in whatever chats they talk about this, sheyesh zona achat b'korchei hayam. There's one famous woman out what we call Salinas, back in there, east of Eden, right? So there's one zona Krachayam that it means in the, I don't know how we translate the islands, the isles, but you know, it was far, that was their end of the world. You got to pay her a sack full of coins for her reward. So Rebbe Elazar ben Dordaya, who might not have been called Rebbe Elazar at that point, Natal kis dinrin. So he got his coins together. He took out the money. V'halach v'avar aleh shiva neharot. Right. He passed 7 streams, showing how much dedication. Of course, you can think of all kinds of meanings of the 7 rivers, etc. And bishat hergel davar. Now, it turns out at the time that they're starting to do the act, okay, actually, hergel davar means tashmish heficha. She passed gas. And he said to himself, or she said, sorry, Amra, she said, it's very interesting, Keshem sheficha zu eino chozeret l'mkoma kach Elazar ben Dordaya mekabel to b'tshuva. That the same way, once you pass gas, it goes out in the atmosphere, there's no coming back. So too, this guy is beyond all hope. He's like a passing wind. Quite a muscle, right? He heard this, it finally penetrated, maybe after all his things, thinking like many people do. I'll do some things wrong, I'll come back. I guess he finally caught on that this is it. I can never do tshuva. My sins have gone out there. Halach v'yashav ben shtei harim givaot. He sat between two mountains and high points. Amari said, it's a very famous song like this, right? Harim hagvaot bikshu alai rachamim. Now I want to do tshuva. I want to go back. I need all the prayers I can get. Mountains and high heights. Request compassion from God for me. Amrullah, they said to him, we're busy for ourselves. We've got to ask for our own compassion. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, the mountains will be flattened and the hills will be diminished. So, okay, we can't pray for you. So then he said, Amar Shemayim v'aretz bikshul rachamim. Heaven and earth, you pray for me. Amru, and they said, we're praying for ourselves. We've got to pray for ourselves. Shneimar, ki shamayim ki ashan nimlachu v'aretz ki beged tivle. Right, that the heavens will be like smoke; they'll dissipate, and the earth will wear away like clothing, meaning it'll be destroyed. So we got to pray for ourselves. So he went to the sun and the moon. Amar chama ulevana bikshu alai rachamim. Amrullah, the same thing. Achanu mevakshim alecha v'akesh al atzma. Shneimar is a pasuk. These are all psukim from Yeshayahu, right? V'chafra levana bosha chama. In the future time, when God judges the world, the sun will be embarrassed and the moon will be bashful. So then he went to Kochavim Mazalot. He said to the stars and the celestial bodies, Bikshu alai rachamim. Amru lo ad shanu v'akshim alechem v'akishal tzmeinu shneimar v'namoku kol tzva hashamayim. All the heavenly spheres will be melted away. Namoku means, right? Meaning they'll be destroyed. Amar, finally, Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai realized, Ein hadavar taloi elabi. I got no one to help me here. If I want to do tshuva, I got to pray for myself. And it says, Hiniach Rosho ben Birkav, he put his head between his feet, his legs, Bega'a bebechi, and he cried and cried, Ad sheyatzta nishmato, till he died. Yatza batko v'amra, Rabbi Elazar ben Dordai, muzman le'chayalam haba. So that is the famous story. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack in that story, but we're going to leave it for Daf Yomi, right? But the point you see from the story for us today is that he was clearly over all kinds of sexual offenses. And his act of doing tshuva led to his death, literally in this case. So ask the Gemara, I have it in parentheses, I don't know if you have it, Claudia, but hahacha ba'avera have umit. Says the Gemara, well, it's true, but he was a very special case. Because Hatam Namik, even the Avik Betuva, he was really good at this, Avera. Minut damya. It's like minut. And I think that's the message of this Gemara, is that minut is such a draw that it attracts you for whatever reason. So it's so hard to get out of. Many times sexual things are not like that. They're one time or they're a few times. For him, it was clearly his whole identity, and getting out of that identity actually killed him. But it did lead to him getting a chelek in olam haba. And Bacha Rebbe, as Rebbe always does in these cases, because Rebbe was probably not alive at the same time, but he said when he heard about it, some people, it takes them a whole lifetime to get a chelek in olam haba, but some get it in one moment. Amar Rebbe, and Rebbe furthermore said, it's not only that God accepts them, El Shekor Notan Rebbe. He was called Rebbe Elazar ben Dordaya, so he gets to be called Rebbe. Now the next story, 2 lines from the bottom, Rabbi Chanina Rabbi Yonatan, Havik Azli Borcha. Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yonatan were once walking down the road. They were Babylonian scholars, I believe. Rabbi Chanina was in Israel. I guess, I don't know if they were in both, but okay, let's say they were in Israel. They were going down the road. Matu lehanhu treshvili. They got to a crossroads, 2 paths. One went by the opening of a big, idol place, of a big temple. And one went by the whorehouse. So they had to decide which one to go to. Let's go to the idol worship one. Why? Because turn the page to Daf Yud Zayin Mebet. The Yetzer Hara for that is diminished. Remember, we had the whole story in Sanhedrin where they took out the Yetzer Hara and from the Beit Kodesh HaKadoshim and they destroyed it. So there's a less of a desire today for Avodah Zarah than there is for minut, than for sexual things, than for znut. But the other one said, no. Let's go to the harder one. Let's go to the house of the zonot. And we will hide, we will subjugate our yetzer, meaning we won't go in and we won't be tempted. And through that, Nikabel Agra will get some reward. So let's do the harder thing and show that we can win. Never a good idea, but that's what they said. Kimatu hatam, when they got to the in front of the house, the Beit Zonot, chazinu the Zonot, it ka'anu mikamayo. They thought the Zonot would hide or scared in front of them, meaning they went back into their holes, Rashi says, meaning they went back inside. See, these Amsterdam vibes, right? But they they hid from them because they were scared of them. So basically they were right. Amalei, so when they were either when they got back home or one said to the other one, Manalachaha, how do you know that this was going to happen? How do you know we were going to be successful? It was a pretty big chance we took. Amalei said, well, it's based on a pasuk in Mishlei, which says, Mizima tishmar alecha, tivuna tinatzrecha. That mizima, and mizima is a reference to Torah, which is translated as mizima, will watch over you. And the tfuna, the knowledge, will prevent anything from happening wrong. And they were learning at the time, Rashi says. But another Rava, what do you mean? How does mizima mean Torah? My mizima, what do you mean by mizima? Ilema Torah, because it dichteve zima, because when we have the word zima, we mitargamin on eitzat chatayin, that it's zima is the wisdom, so basically it's an indirect way of referring to Torah. But what about the other pasuk? It says, or many other pasukim, it says, hifli eitza, igdil toshia. You'll have incredible eitza, right? You're going to translate that means zima, right? Yachi should have said zima mi baile, right? It should have said in the pasuk, not that mizima tishmar will protect you from zima. It should have said zima tishmar. The zima, which is Torah, will protect you. It said back, and this is what the pasuk means. Midvar zima. Zima here is referring not to Torah. It's referring to the act of znut from something inappropriate. Tishmar alecha. You will be protected. Torah tinatzrecha. The Torah will be the one that protects you, and therefore, because they were learning Torah when they were walking by, he was very confident that they wouldn't be tempted by the sexual desire. And they were success. Tanu Rabbanan, we have another Braita, which again goes to the stories of the Asar Harugei Malchut, Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian, which will be mostly tomorrow, some today and some tomorrow. Kishenit Fesu, Rabbi Elazar ben Perta, Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian, when they nitfasu, when they captured, right? These two rabbis. So the Romans obviously were not very enamored, or whoever was in charge. I'm pretty sure it was the Romans or some sect of them. I mean, it was the Romans in general, but there were different sects, right? They were captured basically, and they were going to be persecuted for practicing Judaism. So when they were captured, Amalei Rabbi Elazar ben Pirta, Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian, Rabbi Elazar ben Pirta said to Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian, "Ashrecha, you're lucky. Shenitfast al davar echad. They only got you on one crime. We're going to see the crime was teaching Torah. Oy li, woe to me, they got 5 things against me, so I'm in big trouble. Rabbi Chanina said to him, no, you got it all wrong. You're lucky because you were captured for 5 things, but you're going to be saved from all of them. Oy li, woe to me, I will not be saved. I will end up being guilty and be killed. Why? Said Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian. Sha'at asakta b'Torah u'b'gmilut chasadim. You lived your life with Torah and doing kindness. I dedicated my whole life to Torah, and I don't have the same level of zchut as you have for doing gmilut chasadim, and therefore I don't have any confidence I'm going to come out of this without being killed. He was right. Asked him where good Rav Huna, and he said it. Obviously Rav Huna was a couple generations later, but it's like what Rav Huna said. Rav Huna calls sake b'Torah b'vad. Everyone who just learns Torah and doesn't engage in gmilut chasadim, or the practical application of it, it's as if he doesn't have a God. Shenemar is based on this really strange pasuk, Yamim, where it says Yamim Rabim LeYisrael Elo Elohei Emet. There were many years when Klal Yisrael did not have an Elohei Emet. What does that mean? My Elohei Elohei Emet. It means Shekol Asik B'Torah B'Vad Domek Mishein Lo Eloha. That they weren't kind to each other during those times. So although they fulfilled the mitzvah, it wasn't true. It was like they didn't have a God. Says Gemara, but is that really true about Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian, that he began chasadim lo asak? Hatanya, we have a famous braita in the beginning of Bava Batra that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is quoted as saying, "Lo yitain adam ma'otav la'arnaki shel tzedakah." A person should not give their money to a collection, meaning to a general communal fund, unless you really trust the people distributing that. Ella im came imuneh alav talmid chacham Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian. Unless you've got a gabbai like Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian, because otherwise, like we all know, you give your money, you know what they're doing with it. They're siphoning off some, they're cheating it off. So you shouldn't give your money unless it's someone like Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian. But you see from that story that Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian was in charge of the tzedakah. So clearly he did gmilut chasadim. He wasn't just a scholar. That's why, he knew who David, he was very trustworthy, he kept the books. But mi avid lo avid, he didn't give his own money. He didn't go out and do it. He didn't do as much as he should have done. Ask Gemara, we're going to have tomorrow a very important Gemara. Tanya, when Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian was being brought out, they said to him, have you ever done any mitzvot spontaneously? And Amarlon, he said, this is a quote from tomorrow, Ma'od shel purim nitchavuli b'mod shel tzedakah. I once had, $1,000 for money to Rashi. Rashi has a couple explanations. One is that it was for my Purim Suda. I had money from my own Purim Suda, and I mixed it up with money that I had for charity. I just gave it all to charity. So I gave extra money. Others have other, but either way, I gave extra charity. And I gave it to the aniyim, even though, it was more than I had to give. So you see, he did give charity. So why are you giving him a hard time? Says the Gemara, of course, it's himself giving himself a hard time, right? But mi avid. No, in fact, of course, he did nice things. He gave charity. But the boy lo avid. His point was, I have not done what I could have done. He said about himself that I, Rabbi Chinia ben Tranyan, am not zocheh, and I know I'm gonna not be successful in this. I'm gonna be killed by the Romans because I didn't do the charity that I could have done. And you, Rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Pirta, did do it. So what happened? Atio the Rabbi Elazar ben Pirta. They brought Rabbi Elazar ben Pirta in front of the court, right? I don't know how to say where the place is, but around 20 lines from the bottom. Amru, and they said to him, my time at Tanita, my time at Ganafta. Why did you teach Torah, which you weren't allowed to do? And why did you steal? I guess he had a reputation as a bank robber. And he said to them, it doesn't sound like you have your story straight. I'm like, Isaifa lo safra. Look, if I'm a robber, I'm not a teacher. Isafra lo saifa. Right? These things don't really go together. You're accusing me of two things that don't add up. Umidahaleta hanamileta. I didn't do either. Now, of course, he did do one, but he's saying your claims or whatever proof you have, whatever affidavit people saw me, clearly it's unreliable because these are contradictory, hopefully mutually contradictory things. So he got rid of those two. Remember, there are 5 things they're going to get him on. The third one is my time karlecha Rabbi. A lot of people call you Rabbi. Remember, the Romans outlawed being a Rav, doing smicha, was very, very much against that. They tried to break that whole tradition we talked about before. So why are you called Rebbe? It must be that you got smicha and you're practicing like a rabbi. Amar, he said, no, Rabban shel Tarsiim ani. I'm not a rabbi. I'm a expert weaver. They call me Rabban, right? Rabba can be a word, I guess, for great at something, right? Like you're really good at an expert. So I'm an expert weaver, which of course was a lie. He was not. So they tested him. So Aitile tre kiburi. They brought 2 kiburi, which I don't like, spindles, kind of like, I don't know these words in English very well, but they basically brought him 2 parts from the loom. And I'm relaying, they said to him, hi deshatya, hi arva. Remember, you have, again, I don't know that much about these things, but there's a weft and a warp. Okay, one is, we call it the male and the female, one goes into the other somehow. I'm sure Claudia knows this more than me, but anyways, so, for Shabbat, it's obviously very important, but they brought him these 2 pieces. Of course, he, like every other yeshiva bachar, had no idea what they were, right? So they were testing him. So which one is the weft and which one is the warp? And you'll tell me which one's which. One is the sheti and one is the erev. So, of course, a miracle happened. Drachashle Nisa, and Aitya Ziburt Zubarita, a Zuburta usually means a bee. I think that's how he translates it. But a female bee, right? And sat down Otve al Dishatya, Vatya Zibura, and a male bee came Yatav al Da'arva, because I guess the warp is the male and the weft is one goes into the other, right? So they did the male bee, and he, I guess, knew his male bees and his female bees. And so he said, hello, hi Dishatya, hi Da'arva. So it's always good to know your gender of your bees. This is the shati and this is the Arab. So that was 3 questions. Then they said to him, the 4th claim was Amalei my time to Be'avidan. Be'avidan was the big ceremony and the ritual where you had to, I guess, Rashi goes through a whole thing where they went through the finances of the church and the government and people would have to pay. It was like a big tax day. Because they read, it's a very interesting concept. I don't know if they really had what these things really were back in them. They would all gather together. They would go through like the debts of the church or the religion, and then they would get a tax from everyone there. So it was a big day. Everyone had to attend. You didn't attend, so clearly you reject the religion. Amali said, well, you look, Zaken Hayiti, I'm an old guy. It's very dangerous. They might get trampled. Okay, I was afraid, so I didn't want to go. They said to him, well, that sounds, made up. Ada idza kamasabi, it ramus, kamasabi, it rumus, it ramus. How many old men have been trampled? I mean, it sounds like you're making stuff up. Itrachish nisa, miracle happened. The huyuma irmus chadsab, and that day they got a report right away. Oh, some old guy was trampled at the Hajj, right? So it made him look like a good excuse. And the 5th question they had for him was, "My time at kashafkit abdechal cherut. Why did you free your slave?" Which, again, I don't know that much about Roman society besides a few movies I've seen, but I guess they had a very strong hierarchical structure and slaves had to remain slaves, except maybe there were some conditions. But in Judaism, slaves are freed. And so by Rabbi Elazar ben Pirta freeing his slave, he was demonstrating rejection of the Roman principles and adoption of Jewish principles, and that was a crime. Amarlu, and he said, Lo hayu dvarim me'olam. It never happened. I never freed my slave. But kam chad minay lasudi bay. Right now, of course, there was someone who knew that he did. So someone got up to testify about him. Ata Elio, and of course, Elio came, which happened all the time. And he looked like one of the senators, we'll call him, right? One of the people, the chashuv people in the Malchut. And he said to all the people there, look, right? He said, well, look, Rabbi Elazar and Pirta, look, every accusation you had against him turned out that didn't happen. This must not be true either. And because he got up and spoke, that person was embarrassed. Right? That person got embarrassed because he was going to speak and they weren't going to listen to him. And he got up, come lememar lahu, haviktive garta, right? This guy got up and said, look, I have a letter, or whoever this accusing guy, that was written by the most chashuv people in the Malchut who did an investigation to send to the Kesar, v'shadrua al yadei dahu gavra, and they sent it with this person, meaning he had like some affidavit that they had investigated, or was, etc., and he was going to show that. And Ate Elio came patke arba mea parse, azol v'lo ata. He kicked him 400 parsaot, right? So Elio had the power. I don't know if he threw the letter or threw the person, but he went away and he never came back. So that was how Rabbi Elazar and Pirta magically got out of all these claims. We're going to sadly see tomorrow's daf, on 3 lines in the bottom of Yud Zayin Bet, the Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion, as we all know from the story of the Zarah who gave Malchut, and he was burned with his Sefer Torah. He had one sin, but he did not get off, and he was killed by the Romans. And he said today, we'll see what he says tomorrow, that it's because he was not osekin gemilut chasadim as appropriate, which is quite a thing to say. Okay, Shavua Tov. Good to see you, Robert. We're learning tomorrow morning at 7:45 a.m. Hope to see you.
See you then.
Okay, have a good night.
Night.